Hey you guys, I want to talk to you about the narcissistic fog. If you've ever heard that term before, narcissistic fog, you probably don't really know what it is unless you have experienced it yourself. Have you ever been in fog before? Like a literal type of fog? Like on Christmas Eve of 2022. I almost said this year because it wasn't too long ago. Of last year, 2022, Christmas Eve, I was invited to go to a beach gathering. Gather on the beach with some people, meet some new people, have some food together and all that. And it was... Now, I know where you're from. You know, if you're not living in San Diego, California, you're thinking, what are you doing on the beach in December? Right? Well, you know, I mean, we have pretty good weather here in San Diego. That's something that we are spoiled with, good weather. There's other things that we're not so spoiled with. But anyway, going back to the beach. So that day it was I live close to the beach, but this beach was a little north of me. Right behind me here, it's Del Mar Beach. I'm pointing back because behind me is west. So you've got Del Mar, California beaches. Beautiful beaches. But I drove a little bit north, about 23 minutes or so north of me along the coastline here, to a beach called Carlsbad. And it's an area, and then the beach in Carlsbad. And that day in Carlsbad was so foggy, you couldn't see anything in front of you, like past 20 feet. It looked like the clouds in the sky and the ground, it had all become one. There was no separation. It was so thick and gloomy. And it was super cold. I'm so glad I brought warm clothes with me just in case, because it was really cold. Not, of course, as cold as you guys that live in the snow and all that, but it was a cold day. You didn't want to run around with just shorts on, you know, or women in bikinis. No way. And it was a fog that just wouldn't go away. You can call it a marine layer if you're familiar with the ocean. But it was thick that day, okay, and you're hoping that the sun will come through and burn that stuff off, but it just doesn't happen. And then there's another example of what I experienced last year as well when I came down with C19. I'm not gonna say the name, but you know what I'm talking about. It starts with C. And it's 19. And I got that. And it was a nightmare. It was terrible. One of the worst things about it was this brain fog. And I had heard other people describe a brain fog as a symptom of this thing. But since I didn't experience it, I didn't know what it was until I got it. And let me tell you, that brain fog, it's hard to describe, but it's where you're in this place. All I can describe it is it's kind of like the literal being at the beach on a foggy day like that and never seeing any sunlight at all. And when you go through that brain fog from C19, you just don't think it's ever going to leave you. You're not going to get better. For me, I went through all these weird symptoms. It was trippy. You know, just one thing after another and after another. It's like these little things were trying to get me, and okay, this thing doesn't work, so let's try a different tactic. It was actually like having an entity trying to attach itself to my body and figuring out ways to affect me, right? Well, this didn't work. Somehow his immunity fought that off, so let's try this tactic. And so everything, it just seemed like it was switching tactics. But the one thing that stuck to me was a brain fog. And that brain fog was, I was I wouldn't necessarily call it sleepy. I wouldn't call it exhausted from like, hard work or anything like that. I would call it just being fatigued all day, every day. Extremely fatigued, feeling completely fatigued, even though I didn't test positive of this thing anymore, even though it had left me. That brain fog, it lingered on for a long time, you guys. Really difficult for me to even make videos at that time. I still made them, but man, getting out of that brain fog. And if you know what I'm talking about because you've experienced it, then you can maybe relate a little bit to what it's like for people that go through the narcissistic fog. When you deal with a narcissist, and narcissist is in the Bible, it's the Greek word philatos. It means a lover of oneself. And then there's a bunch of, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, Paul describes to Timothy what a narcissist is, all these different symptoms of them, right? And he describes them very well. And he says that it's going to be rampant in the last days. It's going to be everywhere and make life very difficult for people to cope. Because you'll be surrounded by it. It'll be a fog. A thick gloom everywhere. Everywhere. Now, the difference with that and you is you're a lighthouse. You got Christ in you. You have his light. And so you're like a lighthouse, right? Like a ship that's out in the ocean. And the ocean, it's so foggy and dark out there and they can't see. But there's that little glimmer of hope because there's the light shining. You see that? It might be distant. It might be faint. But you're going to follow that light source to escape the fog, to escape the darkness. See, so you're a little light out there, right? But that narcissistic fog, if you've ever experienced it, you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it's a relationship through a family member, like, relative, that's where a relationship comes from, relative, having relations, so it's family relation. Maybe you were raised by narcissists. Maybe your siblings are narcissists. Maybe your relatives are narcissists. Maybe your religious people that you're around, the religion you're in, full of narcissists. Make sure you're not the narcissist as well, you guys. One thing to point the finger and call everybody one, but what if you're the narcissist? You got to do a self-check. That's the only thing that can get a narcissist out of being a narcissist is to get the Spirit of Christ, right? Because you can do all things through the power of Christ that's in you. But you also have to take accountability, right? Accountability for it. And that's the thing a narcissist doesn't ever do. Practically impossible. With their own strength and abilities, it is impossible. But like I said, Paul says you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So if you've ever been in a relationship though in one way and you've experienced the narcissistic fog, your life's it's a nightmare because you fell so hard in love with this person. And then when the narcissism in them got exposed, you were already too deep. You were in it too deep. And if it was a family member, well, you're kind of stuck because maybe you're a child and your parents are the narcissist. You're stuck in their home. Right? That's why a lot of kids run away from home. They seem like bad, rebellious children because they just want to be disobedient brats. But maybe those kids are the victims of narcissist parenting. Maybe even the victims of narcissist siblings as well. And if you've ever exited that narcissistic fog, well, the first exited the narcissistic relationship. That fog sticks with you for a long time, it seems. Now, some people recuperate much quicker than others. Maybe they jump into another relationship that ends up being amazing and they get out of that narcissistic fog right away. Everybody heals differently, and some it takes a long time. Some the fog stays around so long. It's just like you can't get out of it. Is there any way out of it? Well, it's the sunlight that gets that fog to dissipate eventually you will see that sunlight. Is the sunlight there when there's fog? Yeah, but the fog is blocking you from seeing the light. Basically, there comes a time where you're going to snap out of it. And it might not be the snap of a finger. Snapping out of it seems like a quick thing. But there will be a time where you will see the light again. The light is always there. It's just your head has to get cleared up. Because your mind, you are in a battle, a war that confused you. You don't even know what caused this war or anything. But suddenly the love of your life went to being the craziest enemy in your whole life. And it took you off guard and took you and almost incapacitated you. Like I said, like Paul said to Timothy, it'll make life hard to cope, meaning you can't imagine even moving forward in life. You're never going to get over this. You feel like you're wrecked for good, and you might even want to give up, and you might have given up on hope or anything like that. But don't give up. Life will get better again. That fog will dissipate. You will heal. You will recover. You will move forward. You will move ahead. You will meet those people that will connect with you, that actually have true love inside of them. Self-sacrificial love, which is agape. No kind of love that the narcissist knows about at all. Because their love is philatos, a love of self. Not an agape love of self. We're talking about an egotistical love for self where nothing matters in life except for them. Now, I have a friend that is from Buffalo, New York, and he told me that there was one year that they experienced 300 days in a row of no sunlight. 300 days in a row of no sunlight. Do you know how depressing that is? Do you know that causes a lot of things? Like even people taking their own lives. It's that serious. I know people that have children that have graduated high school, graduate high school, and now they're in college, and so they leave San Diego, because I'm in San Diego all my life. So they talk about how their kids are left San Diego to go to college, go somewhere else, out of state somewhere. And some of these students go to a college and colleges in Seattle. If you know anything about Seattle's known to be beautiful for one thing. I haven't been there myself. I haven't been to Seattle ever. But I hear it's quite beautiful, very green, because Seattle gets lots and lots and lots of rain, and you don't ever see sunlight. Sunlight is very rare in Seattle. It constantly rains. And so what these parents do for their children is what a lot of people that live in Seattle do. They put sun lamps in their room to give them a little bit of a sense of sunlight. So they put these sun lamps in the room so that the students won't get depressed because of being in that thick gloom of darkness and not experience any natural sunlight. And if you can understand what I'm trying to say about the sunlight in this video, I'm talking about the SON light, okay? So if you can understand why I'm talking about the SUN, I'm relating it to the SON. Just like when I'm talking about a literal lighthouse, well, and I'm calling you that lighthouse. It's not that you turn into a literal lighthouse, sitting there at the ocean. It's metaphorical. But that narcissistic fog, you guys, that fog can and will be lifted through the SON light. And if you don't believe in the SON, who I call Yeshua, who many call Jesus, that's the only source that ever helps me get out of that fog. Even the physical, literal fog from C-19, because if he didn't give me an immune system, right? And I do believe in when his spirit's in you, you have his health in you. And if you want to be healed, you can be healed immediately, or even sickness just bounces away from you, can't come near you, like you're a human walking bug zapper. When sickness tries to come near you, it dies. I do believe that is very possible. It's getting his spirit to be to flow out of you, and that is, and to get it to flow out, you have to cut off all sources of unbelief. Unbelief will restrict it from flowing, right? But believing right gets it flowing. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this channel and in my personal life, is get rid of all this unbelief stuff that has been, planted in me like seeds everywhere. Now I'm uprooting those seeds through the help of the Spirit of Christ that dwells in me. So Yeshua, the Hebrew name for Jesus, he is my only hope for health. And he's whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, you name it, he's my only hope. You can depend on therapy and therapists and medication, and that's going to cost you a whole lot of money. And how long does that work for? How long does that stick to you for? Until you need to go back to them again. Or, and I'm not saying don't ever get help or anything like that, but I'm saying my source is not a physical doctor, not my finances, not the medication. It's Christ. It's Christ in me, not Christ outside of me, Christ in me. Tuning into Christ in me, depending on Christ in me, and then releasing Christ in me, right? Not releasing Christ in me to leave me. No, releasing Christ in me, an everlasting flowing spirit that is not limited by time nor space. But trust me, you guys, that fog, that narcissistic fog you're going through, eventually it will lift. If you don't have Christ in your life, you're not, because you don't believe he's in your life. If you just start believing, you got to get religious stuff out of you, and all the people that have claimed to be the examples, the people that we represent Christ, and they've done such a terrible job. You got to stop judging him upon other people, right? Because those people haven't figured out who Christ is in them and who they are in Christ. They're still seeing it in a religious way, right? If I live by this set of rules, if I go by my obedience and all that, then, I'm a good example of a Christian and Christ really loves me. And they don't get it. They don't understand a personal relationship with him, right? So they have this form of godly devotion, but proving false to its power. If you only could understand what I'm talking about. We'll go deeper in these things with time. But anyhow, I just want to unveil to you, because this is a year where I'm talking a lot about unveiling. We're going to continue talking about unveiling. And when you're stuck in that fog, and that fog's like a veil. That narcissistic fog, it's like a veil. It's such a nightmare, because you put everything you had into this relationship, no matter what it was, or doing the best as a child, and having to stay in your parents' home for 18 years or so, whatever it took, and finally being able to get out of that nightmare. And 18 years is a long time to endure something like that, right? A long time. There was a woman in the Bible that was bent over. She couldn't get up. She couldn't stand straight. She was always looking at the ground, walking with her face toward the ground. Her back was tweaked. She was bent over. She couldn't put her back straight. Imagine, how did she go to the bathroom? Imagine, how did she eat? Imagine, this woman, what a nightmare. 18 years nonstop being like that, until she met Christ. Until she met Christ. There's a whole bunch of you that lived a nightmare for 18 years, maybe even longer. And I'm telling you, that nightmare ends when you get Christ. I'm not saying you're never going to have challenges anymore when you have Christ, sure, but he's the strength that gets you through those challenges. So, God bless you all. I love you all. I understand what you're going through with these things. Trust me, I can relate. So I hope my videos are helping you. All right? And I hope you all have a great day. Stay warm. Stay true. Keep dwelling in the light. Remain, abide in the light. When you're in that fog, push through. Don't worry. It's going to lift. Give it time. Love you guys. Have a great one. And I'll see you next time.